Hello everybody, thanks for being here. This week I want to introduce Project 4, the Multimodal Remix, which is going to be the last assignment that you work on for this class. And we'll go over the assignment description and guidelines together, and I'll spend some time elaborating on those and why I think it's a useful project for us to work on and think about, and also why it's a useful ending point or a suitable ending point for the end of our class here. It kind of borrows elements from the previous three projects and from other ideas that we've discussed throughout the semester, and so it's a good place to end working on a project like this. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, I do want to remind everybody that Project 3, the analysis of a text, is due this week, and you should have gotten your rough drafts back from me with my comments on them sometime over this weekend. If you have any questions on those, as usual, email me, let me know. I'd be happy to go over them with you if you want to talk about either my comments or if you want to talk about some ideas that you had or if you got stuck on anything. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you about that. So yeah, don't forget that Project 3 final draft is due this week. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and get into talking about Project 4. And the assignment guidelines will be posted up on Blackboard, and you can go to those in your own time and read through them. I'm going to just kind of read through it here today in this lecture, and you can listen along that way as well. So, project number 4, our final project for this class, is called the Multimodal Transformation. So, your final assignment for this class is to create a multimodal remix of one or more of your writing assignments. So, the Everyone's an Author textbook, I actually don't have it with me right now, it's in the other room. But the Everyone's an Author textbook describes multimodal texts as those which, quote, draw on more than words, bringing in still or moving images, sound, and so on, unquote. So, while most academic texts have traditionally been restricted to the linguistic mode, and by that I mean words, either written or spoken, the rise of digital media has created new possibilities for writers looking for more perfect ways to express their ideas. Because sometimes the best way to convey an idea is not through words. The expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, exists for a reason, after all, right? A good writer must have a working knowledge of the other means of conveyance that are available. This is tying back to what we discussed in the lecture last week as well, the 2 readings that we did for last week about the benefits and sort of the downsides of new media and new technology. The Carr essay and the Pinker essay are pretty good bridges from what we were talking about before to what we're going to be talking about now. So another good reason for wrapping up this semester with a multimodal assignment is because such work will require you to put many of the rhetorical strategies you have learned during the past 2 projects to use as you create your own text. The fact that we are back to telling a story / making an argument makes this project more closely related to your thesis-driven narrative assignment. Only this time, the decisions you make in composition will be more informed and more deliberate. When we think about the word composition itself, it might give you an idea as to why the English department wants to have this sort of an assignment in a English composition class. When we think of the word composition, it can certainly mean writing essays, doing research papers, things like that, but it also has a broader meaning, and that meaning can encompass anything from music, right, to performance art. A composition doesn't just have to be words, it doesn't just have to be text, it can be many different things, and when an author has all those different means at their disposal, it's important for them to be able to determine what the most appropriate mean is in order for them to be able to convey whatever sort of idea or whatever sort of story that they want to convey. I hope that makes sense. Just because we have new technology, for example, and I think we'll talk more about this next week, that doesn't mean that the best way to tell a story is through cinema, through a movie. Sure, we have CGI, special effects, we can have all these cool things that we never see before, but if you were a creator and you were wanting to tell a story that had a heavy emphasis on the inner monologues that characters have, or if you wanted to have a sort of stream of consciousness writing where a whole bunch of space is devoted to talking about how the characters are feeling, what they're thinking, things that aren't visible outwardly, it's hard to capture that in a movie. Although it is possible, but the more natural mean of expression there would probably be something like a novel, because in a novel you can't just lay it all out. And the reverse is true as well. You see it sometimes when they come out with the really crappy novelizations of big Hollywood blockbuster movies that nobody really reads. Sometimes a story that you're trying to tell lends itself better to the visual. Think of... Oh, here we go. Think of a novel about Godzilla or King Kong. The novel itself wouldn't really do the idea of what Godzilla is justice, because it's definitely a visually driven story. It's a big lizard destroying buildings. A novel about Godzilla would be kind of silly and kind of boring. So it's appropriate for the movie, but it's not appropriate for the written word. And then the reverse of that, as I was just talking about, there are things that are appropriate for the written word that wouldn't quite be appropriate for a movie. And we can see this in play, too, when people try to do adaptations from one genre or one medium into the other. One that comes to mind that happened recently was the movie Cats that came out. Now, I didn't see it because I've never seen the musical. I don't know much about it, but I know that it was received with mixed reactions, to say the least. The trailer came out, everybody looked kind of like weird, half cat, half human creatures. There were CGI cats with people bodies running around, and it was really strange and bizarre. And in the mean that story is initially told, Broadway, it's a Broadway musical, that thing can be overlooked, that weirdness. Because, of course, on the stage, it's not unusual to see an actor come out dressed up in something that vaguely resembles what they're supposed to be looking like. The stage isn't striving for authenticity in that regard. But when you try to take that story that was written for stage, meant to be performed on stage, and transfer it to a different medium that doesn't really suit it, you have kind of a weird mix where all of a sudden you realize, oh, well, how would you have done that? Would you have wanted them to actually look like anthropomorphic cats or something, like the Lion King movie did, and then just have them singing? Would you want them to have been people? It didn't quite work. So it's a matter when you're creating something, whether it be a story or whether you're writing some sort of an argument. It's a matter of knowing what tools you have available at your disposal to work with and being able to select the best tools. And we would be remiss in a class on composition if we strictly focused on just one of those tools, on the writing. We do want to have at least one assignment in this class that's focused on other forms of composition, other ways of expressing what you're trying to say. So another thing to keep in mind with this project in particular is your work's audience. So while we have thus far been writing with an academic audience in mind, this project is asking you to consider non-academic audiences, because the type of multimodal project that you choose is going to determine what audience you should be writing to. And you'll want to consider how to best highlight certain aspects or points of your project in order to be appealing to that audience. So keeping that question in mind, let's turn to the different mediums that you can pursue. So given the wide range of topics that we've covered in this class, I do hesitate to restrict your options to merely 3 or 4 types of multimodal projects. If you have something very specific in mind that you would like to experiment with, then feel free. This is your opportunity to kind of be creative, try new things. Just make sure that whatever it is does meet the general criteria, which we'll be talking about in a minute, and is somehow deliverable to me through Blackboard, especially now since everything's coming through Blackboard. If you do have questions or doubts as to whether or not something will work, you can ask me and we can discuss it. So with that being said, here are a few projects that you might want to consider. Now, I do want to remind you, because if you go back in and read over the assignment description and guidelines on your own, people have gotten confused because I give a list in those guidelines of the different sorts of projects you could do for this 4th project. You don't have to do all 3 of them. You can just pick one. You don't have to feel restricted to just the ones that are there. Kind of like I just said before, if there's something else that you want to try, then you can feel free. The ones that I have listed here are just ones that in the past I know that students have done and that they've enjoyed working with, and they're the ones that are easier to get to me digitally. So you might decide that you want to do a video essay. And this type of project will allow you to present images, sounds, and words in many different ways. If you do this, you will want to draft a script for any text that will be spoken, either on camera or read as a voiceover. You will also want to consider where you would like to film, what sort of angles you might use. So for example, whether you will use a tripod or film using a handheld camera, things like that. Feel free, again, to be as creative as possible with this. Perhaps you would like to have characters who act out certain arguments that you made in your past writings. So, for example, say you wanted to take the 2 essays from last week, the one that was pro-technology and the one that was anti-technology, roughly, and you wanted to play that argument out in a sort of skit or a video scene. You could have actors, one taking the position of Carr and one taking the position of Pinker, and have them do some sort of a scene or a skit where their positions are acted out. Maybe you would like the video essay to be a fictional scene wherein you use some of the techniques that we talked about during our unit on visual analysis. And if you're doing this, feel free to enlist the help of some friends. If anybody has the acting bug and wants to help you out for this project, that'd be great. And if you do this type of a project, you will need to have access to a camera. Perhaps your cell phone will fulfill your needs. Most cell phone cameras work out pretty well with projects such as this. And you'll also want to have some video editing software, either iMovie or Windows Movie Maker. Those are 2 of the more popular ones. I'm using iMovie to make these videos. It's worked pretty well so far. If you do decide that the video essay is the route that you want to take for this project, I would aim for making it about 10 minutes long. Another option, if you don't want to do that, if you don't fancy yourself a filmmaker, or if that's not something that's appealing to you, you could do an audio essay or a podcast. So not unlike a speech, podcasts require you to develop a script using everyday language, which has an organized beginning, middle, and end, and which is designed to keep your listeners engaged. So advantages that podcasts have which speeches do not is that you can include sound effects to establish the setting and background music to establish the mood and mark transitions. So you'll want to decide early on which software you will use to record. Audacity and GarageBand are popular. and also familiarize yourself with how to use it. I will be posting some links on our Blackboard site about how to use some of these. I'm going to find some good, helpful how-to videos on YouTube, how to use GarageBand, Audacity, things like that will walk you through it. Should you choose to create a podcast, again, you should aim for making it about 10 minutes long. And there are a couple different types of podcasts you could do. I don't know if anybody is a big fan of listening to podcasts, but if you are, you know that there's different styles. Sometimes it's just one person talking, and you can certainly do that. Other times it can be two people, and it's more conversational. They can be discussing ideas or kind of having sort of a free-form talk. You could even structure it as sort of in one of the old-time radio shows where you could have a caller call in and ask a question and you could answer it. The caller you would have to have be a friend or somebody who'd be willing to participate. But those are just some ideas that you can use if you decide you want to do the podcast route. A third type of project that you could do is an illustrated essay. So this project will require you to communicate your thesis and research through images. And these can be either as embedded within a written essay or as a standalone, or it can be a standalone project such as a collage, or you could even do a comic strip. The sort of images that you might consider using would be photos, graphs, charts, maps, or drawings of your very own. Each image should help to communicate your message, not be merely for show. So in the past, I've had students turn in really cool paintings, comic strips. We're going to talk more about comic strips in a bit. A bit later in the coming weeks, there's an essay in our Everyone's an Author textbook that tells itself through the comic form. One student one time had taken the book cover that she'd used for her media analysis project, because that was what she decided to talk about for that, and she recreated a new version of that book cover on canvas, and that was her project 4, and it was really, really good, really well done. I'm not much of a painter, but I'm kind of envious of those who are. So, while each of these projects do involve their own specific requirements and concerns, having to know how to use a specific technology, having to have the right materials, things like that, each of them should do the following, and these are the criteria that you'll be graded on for this assignment. They need to, 1, make an engaging, persuasive argument about your topic. And your topic itself, if I didn't make it clear earlier, is up to you. It just has to be tied back to one of your previous 3 projects in some way. So it can be a multimodal remix of your thesis-driven narrative. Say your thesis-driven narrative was just depicting one scene, and you decide that you want to do like a short movie, and you just get some friends and you act out that scene. That's what it is. If you're wanting to do a podcast about media and the types of rhetorical appeals and means of persuasion that advertisers use to sell their product, and that was something that you worked with for your media analysis, you could have a podcast where you talk about the piece of media that you already analyzed for Project 2, and you can just read through that, discuss it with somebody else, things like that. So whatever topic it is that you choose for this 4th project has to be tied back to one of the 3 previous projects in some way. 2, you're going to have to utilize at least 3 external sources. And one of these can be, again, actually one of these should be one of your past writing projects for this class. Another could be an example of a video essay or a podcast that you find that serves as sort of an inspiration for your own work. You'll talk about how you utilize these sources in a written assessment memo, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So you don't have to actually directly quote your sources in the podcast or in the comic strip itself. You're going to be doing that in sort of a separate section. And also, you'll want to make sure that this project that you do gives a sense of the specific audience that you're addressing. In the week of April 27th to May 1st, and you can check that out, I've posted now a revised syllabus for these online classes. So go and see the week of April 27th to May 1st. It's the week before finals week. You will be asked to present your work so far to the rest of the class on our class discussion board. So while your multimodal project doesn't have to be completed at this time, you should be able to write for at least a paragraph or two on your project. You should be able to write about why you chose the specific medium that you did to work with, any difficulties that you've encountered and have either overcome or need help with, and how the project successfully conveys the topics that you covered in one or more of your past papers. You might need to remind the class in this post of what your past topics were or was and what your stance is on it. If we'd been meeting normally, like before all this craziness happened, this would have been your project presentations. We would have taken a day out of class where each person would have come up to the front of class for about 5 minutes or so and just chatted about their project and gotten some feedback. They would have been really informal. You wouldn't have had like anything completed or anything prepared to show. They were just an opportunities to have a roundtable discussion about how far you've come and what the class thinks of it. So to sort of emulate that idea, after this, please give thoughtful feedback to at least one other student's post in that discussion board for that week. You can ask one or two questions where you would like more clarification, or you can offer suggestions. Maybe somebody was saying that they were thinking about doing a podcast, but as you're reading about their topic, you think that that idea is better conveyed visually, and you might suggest it to them. So these discussions hopefully will act in much the same way as our rough draft workshops have done in the past. They'll give you an opportunity to share your idea with somebody else in the class and to get some helpful feedback. So posting your own presentation and responding to another student's will earn you 4 points of the overall grade for this assignment, which is roughly equivalent to the rough draft points that you've been getting for the past assignments, which is 19 points. The assignment overall is worth 19 points. The multimodal project itself will be due on Wednesday, May 6th, finals week, on Blackboard. So that's the multimodal project itself. And so far, we've covered two elements of it. There's the presentation, the rough draft presentation that you're going to do on the discussion board, which is worth the 4 points. The project itself, which is worth the 15 points. And there's actually a third component that I want to go ahead and introduce to you now. If we'd been meeting regularly, I wouldn't have thrown this all at you in one lecture, but that's the way things go, I suppose. And I want to get all this information out to you as quick as possible so that you have time to start thinking about it. But the third component shouldn't take you too long to do. It's relatively easy, and that is the Multimodal Remix Assessment Memo. And I'm going to have the description and guidelines for this posted to Blackboard under our assignments tab as well. So this last writing assignment asks you to reflect on the process that you underwent to create your multimodal project. So the multimodal project is a creative one, and due to this, it's difficult to grade for me according to established criteria. Perhaps you incorporate music for your project that you think really speaks to your topic or something that you're trying to say, but for some reason that just goes right over my head. Perhaps you use an image to convey an idea, and you want to clarify what exactly that image means to you for fear that it may not resonate with either your peers or myself in the same way. So basically, this assessment memo is your opportunity to explain what you're trying to accomplish with your multimodal projects. You are being asked to think about, you're being asked to think and write reflectively about why you made certain decisions that you did and whether or not you think you've succeeded. So this is also an opportunity to show off your projects. In this memo, you have the chance to be your own best advocate, write about what elements of the project you were proud of, write about some of the difficulties that you encountered and how you overcame them. Maybe you didn't know how to use a type of technology that you needed to use. You didn't know how to use GarageBand or something like that, and you had to figure it out. You can write about that. While this writing assignment is designed to be rather informal and metacognitive, you should try to directly address at least the 3 following questions in it. 1, why did you choose the mode that you did? What was it specifically about the mode you chose to work in that suited it to your topic? 2, what worked well? List at least 2 things. You can list more, but list at least 2 things that you think worked really well with your multimodal project or that you're proud of. These are things that you're going to want me as the grader to look for, because again, these projects being creative, everybody's turning in something that looks different. I want to know what you are proud of about the project and what you think you did really well, so that I can give that element of the project the attention that it deserves, and I don't notice something completely different that you weren't even really focused on and look at that other thing when I'm going about grading it. And 3, what did you learn? You can consider this question in regard to the semester as a whole, or just in regard to this specific project. It's the final writing assignment, so you can merge those if you'd like. This question can address either your topic, something about the writing process or language, or technical specifics about your multimodal project. But tell me what you took away from it. Anything useful that you think you're going to use either in future classes or in life, things like that. So this project assessment memo should be about just 1 page to 1.5 pages long. Like I said, not super stressful, not anything to worry about too much. And really, I think that the best way to go about doing this is to actually write it as you're doing your multimodal project itself. Think of it as sort of like a creator's vlog, or I guess a blog, that each step you take in Project 4, you can go to the assessment memo and reflect on that step. So that way, by the time you finish up the multimodal project, your assessment memo is done too, and it's all still fresh in your mind. So you can do it like that, or if you want to, you can wait until you're actually done with the project and then go in and type up the assessment memo real quick. Just 1 page to 1.5 pages. Shouldn't take you too long to get that done. And this is due on the final day of class as well, Wednesday, May the 6th, and it's going to be worth 5 points. So, to summarize, there are 3 components to Project 4. There is the rough draft workshops, which used to be presentations, but this time around we're going to meet on the discussion board to talk about them. You're going to talk about how things are going and then comment on another student's post, give them feedback, give them suggestions. There's the multimodal project itself, whatever that may be, whatever you decide to do. And there's the multimodal project assessment memo, which you'll turn in on the same day as the project. And it's sort of the written justification for what you did on that project. Now, because we're not meeting in person this semester, if you do decide that you want to do something physical, and I don't want to rule out physical, because like I mentioned earlier, I've had students in the past that did turn in a really cool painting or did anybody do this, or did I just think it'd be really cool if somebody did this? In either case, I always thought that something like a diorama would be neat. I think that the idea of doing dioramas for projects ever since like in elementary school, when you had to make one out of a shoebox and pour sand and have fake trees in there or whatever the diorama was supposed to be. Dioramas are neat. Models, if you wanted to do a model of something out of clay, all those sorts of physical projects that aren't digitally deliverable. What I would usually do would be to have you bring those to my office during finals week, and I would look at them then. Since we can't do that now, I think that instead I would ask you to, if you decide to do something physical like that, I would ask you to make sure you get it in a place where there's good lighting and just photograph it with your phone or with a camera from either up close or far away. Get as many different angles of it as you can, and then just submit the photographs of it to me. That's not the most fun way of doing things, but that's just going to have to be how it works this semester around. So a lot of what I just read to you, again, is going to be under the Assignments tab on Blackboard. There's the assignment description and guidelines for both the multimodal remix and the multimodal assessment memo. Please go and check out those. Make sure that you understand the assignment. Make sure that you have a sense of what you're going to do for this assignment. If you're really stuck, email me and let me know. And again, I think for a lot of people, the hardest part of it is just finding a topic to work with. What do you want to do? You're being asked to, express yourself or make an argument in some way, right? The past two writing assignments have been about analyzing the work of others, and this one's coming back around to asking you to make a statement of your own. And there's a symmetry here to the thesis-driven narrative, because you were being asked the same thing then. You were given basically free rein to write about what you wanted to write about. It could have been fiction or nonfiction. The only difference now is that this time around, hopefully, you'll be able to utilize some of the stuff that you've learned from analyzing writings and works of others in the past two assignments. So you can still tell a similar story or present a similar argument or thesis that you did in your thesis-driven narrative, for example, but this time you can apply the rhetorical appeals. You can have a better sense of who your audience is going to be and address them better that way. So things like that. Just think about what you want to do, what you want to say for this project, and then think about what sort of medium would be the best medium to use to convey that thing that you want to say. All right, so I'm going to call it quits for this lecture. If you guys have any questions, again, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. And that will be about it. Everybody have a good day.